Hello, checking in with the first 6 chapters of Gulliver of Mars by Edwin Lister Arnold. See if I can get the name right. I'm checking in, so I'm still just catching my feet here. So this is the first 5 chapters of this 1905 novel, kind of considered a inspiration to Edgar Rice Burroughs, and you'll be able to tell from my description that it's remarkably similar in some ways to his Barsoom series with John Carter of Mars. So in the opening chapter, we're in New York, and Lieutenant Gulliver Jones is in the city. He's trying to get advancement. He's basically playing the political game to try and get advancement, not going well. He's wandering the street one night when suddenly something black swoops out of the sky and deposits a man on the ground. Man on the ground who, on his feet, who immediately kind of keels over backward, strikes his head, and ends up being dead. He ends up there's a carpet with him, which apparently he was maybe wrapped in. He takes the carpet back to his place. He's kind of a lot of frustrations. His career is not going well. He's away from his the sweetheart he has down the thing. And if he doesn't have enough of a position, apparently he just won't be able to kind of close that deal. And he says, I wish I was anywhere else. I wish I was in Mars, on Mars. At which point the carpet scoops him up, wraps him up, and shoots out the window and up to Mars, where he is deposited. He gets deposited, kind of basically gets spat out, whacks into this youth, and they go tumbling. There's a whole bunch of kind of people kind of languidly lying around, and it turns out it's this person named Anne. Who he assumes is a boy at first, a beautiful boy, and it's sort of kind of a little bit of a kind of a, wow, he's very, very, very beautiful, kind of that kind of like, oh, well, you're a sailor and maybe any bunk in a storm kind of thing, you get the impression of. But as it goes along, he's like, you talk about men if they were you're outside of them with the other yellow clad people. Notices that this Anne is wearing kind of a yellow robe, and there's certain other people who are all wearing yellow robes. All the Martians seem to be very kind of slim and slender and elegant and kind of lackadaisical and listless, at least in this part of the world with a purple sky. And it's just like, aren't you a man? Are you a man or are you a maid? And Anne is like, no, I'm not either. This is after Anne has actually used their mental powers to actually give Gulliver the kind of the power of Martian tongue. It basically kind of teaches him it in an instance. So we get over the language barrier pretty quickly there. But it's like, I'm neither man nor maid. It's like I'm neither. And what N goes on to describe is that they've been cursed by the gods to be they affected to be one of the genders, but were cursed by the gods to be none. And indeed, Anne pulls out a little dagger and kind of challenges Gulliver, who pulls out his big sword, which is like a little dagger and a big sword. I don't know if there's any phallic things going on there. Feels like it. The purient me is like, I wonder what the biology of Anne is. But and we can never love. We can never love, apparently, this kind of slave caste of Martian. And it's like, well, or hardly ever. It kind of gives him a look, which is like, oh, maybe you're the one. Maybe you're the one. So Anne takes him kind of on this tour of the thing. It's all done very kind of like, it's a very picturesque novel, lots of description, lots of we're kind of languidly going along. This isn't the warlike race of the Tarths or the scientific hard driving things of the heliums of the John Carter. This is not a pulp fiction story where we're kind of going tick tick. This is very much picaresque, descriptive, kind of literary stuff. I've been reading this out loud, and it's like, oh, it's actually kind of fun to read in its languid, kind of over descriptive kind of way. Um, so he introduces him to the drinks that they have, which are they have certain different effects, and there's even a drink at the end. You drink this, and it brings you out of it. But if you drink too much of one thing, but you don't drink the right number, it won't bring you bliss. And indeed, it's the first time I think he does it. He doesn't drink enough, so it doesn't bring him to bliss. He just kind of passes out. But they they go along the thing. He takes some she Anne. I'm not going to say now. Now Gulliver calls Anne she. He's like, well, if you're not man or maid, well then you're she. And so in my mind, Anne or they them they them. I'll go with they take him to see the Prince Hath, who is the kind of the governor, as Lieutenant Gulliver says, as a very kind of American. This is written by a British guy, but American saying like, "Take me to your president," kind of thing. It's like, well, I'll take you to our Prince Hath, who is a kind of a sallow fellow in like a dark suit, kind of a little bit more grim, still very kind of thin and gaunt. But he is the ruler. He's on a barge, and he's on a barge with Haru, who's Princess Haru, who Gulliver immediately goes, "Wow, you are gorgeous. I like you." Which is like, I was kind of hoping for more Anne action, but apparently not. But a log comes down the way at that point, knocks her off the thing. Nobody else is being manly, like Gulliver, so he jumps overboard and saves her as she's been knocked overboard, and saves her, and she's like, "Oh, thank you," and for his troubles, he's put up at the palace. Now, there's a lot of things with Anne. Anne has definitely kind of developed feelings for Gulliver, but ends up leaving him, kind of just saying like, "Oh, I have other things I need to do, and perhaps I'm reaching out for too much." And so they wander off, and so he's left, and we get much more of him of Gulliver with the princess. Now there's a background here of everyone. He's come upon the season where everyone is about to be wed. Everyone in the whole city gets wed, and it's done by random draw. This seems to be a very kind of there's a lot of things here that are very socialist, very kind of a weird kind of either utopia / dystopia, because like there's no property ownership. People don't know who particularly their mother or father is, or it doesn't make any difference particularly more one way or the other who gave birth to them. And when you get married by a drawn lot. And it's like, well, and if you don't really like each other, you don't have to kind of go by that. You can do some horse trading apparently. So it's a very and Gulliver is becoming to get kind of frustrated because he's a red-blooded, kind of hard-driving capitalist American, and he's finding this society. It's like it's also very listless and languid, and it seems like the people who aren't in the yellow robes, they just kind of lay around and expect to get served, and it's very kind of listless and la la la. And it's like, well, how did you make this great city? Well, it's like turns out this great city is something that they've inherited, but it's not something that they actually built themselves. And well, how have you not conquered? Well, it turns out that they actually were conquered, and the guy who has conquered them is Arhap, who takes goods, and also when there's the wedding, chooses his own bride, the beautiful one there, which with Gulliver's feeling, and Gulliver's like, well, if that ever happened to me, if someone ever took the woman I love, I would move heaven and earth to kind of to change it. It's like, okay, we can see the plot slowly coming to fruit, coming up here, because indeed he's definitely into Princess Haru, Haru. I'm going to go with, so indeed he's in the palace, and he's curious because it's like, where's the prince? I'm trying to learn things. I need to figure out what the hell's going on. And he's missing his home because this is such a listless place. He finds the prince in the library, but he's passed out drunk, or he's drunk something, and he can't rouse him. So he looks around at the books, and he finds like there's one ancient beautiful tome which is like so old, but is being used as a mouse trap. It's being basically propped up, and if a mouse comes along, it'll whack it. And indeed, there's mouse blood on it. But he's like, oh, I wonder what this book is. At which point, Princess Haru shows up, and it's like, oh, hey, hi. And it's like, could you read the title of this to me? And it's like, it's The Secret of the Gods. And he's like, oh, okay, that's an interesting. Can you read some of the book to me? She's like, read me. I am your book. Kind of that kind of thing. And then we have one of those tasteful little jumps, which is definitely a they made out kind of things, and she's laying his head on his shoulders afterwards. Definitely as much of an implied you can get that of Sexy Times for a 1905 book. This is definitely a lot more sexual, a lot more kind of sensual than John Carter. While it doesn't have the plot, it definitely has a lot of sensuality in it. And so she starts reading the book to him. And it's like, oh, it's the secrets of the god, the origins. And it's like, they're flipping through and it's like, hey, that's the earth. That's the planet. Could you read that? And it's like, does it say anything about like, the Egyptians? Because it looks like it's got hieroglyphics there. It's like, just say anything ISIS. And that's like, and she starts reading and it's like, oh, well, yeah, it's interesting that you knew that because there's she reads out a bit that's about ISIS, but then it cuts off because the mice have gotten at those particular pages and chewed it down. So she says, well, flip to a next part where it says something, and it starts to talk about what sounds like the origin of life, of kind of the nucleus shooting out and kind of infusing kind of the worlds with life and stuff like that. But just as she's getting to the good part, the dinner bell rings and she puts down the book and says, oh, dinner time. And he's like, oh, crap. And it's like, he refuses dinner because he's used to seaman rations and all this massive feasting and stuff like that. Just doesn't settle well in his stomach. So he goes out into the city to walk around. I'm a man. But, predictions, I can definitely see that Arhap is going to take a bride, and that bride will be Princess Haru, and Gulliver Jones will have to spring into action, which will be thank goodness, or else he would have just kind of probably fallen into dissipation, and that would have really been a very low-key novel. This is definitely, I can see if Pulp Fiction fans come from Edgar Rice Burroughs and come to this expecting another Pulp Fiction story. This isn't really a Pulp Fiction story. It's a fantasy story. It's a Fantasia story, but the plotting seems very picaresque. We're like just kind of languidly exploring the world. We're in chapter 5, and by this point, John Carter would be like midway through the first adventure, whereas we haven't really even gotten to the first adventure yet. We're just kind of like, oh, we're very languidly. We've met Anne, the ambiguously gendered companion, who. It's like, that's kind of interesting. And it's kind of interesting that Gulliver's like, well, no, I'm just going to call you a girl, which is, what you would just expect, I think, from a dude of this time. But we do also have a princess plot going. It's starting up. But it's interesting. Just the world that he's decided to set this in, is very much kind of, it's almost like a socialist utopia world, which definitely you can see kind of a capitalist American hard driver seeing this as like, this is it's like maybe going to Europe and like all these people are just taking it way too easy, and what the hell is all this socialism happening here? It's like there's you can see this is like you're having the two hard contrasts of the American on one side and kind of like some kind of a weird socialist utopia European, except it's a Martian instead. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the first six chapters of Gulliver of Mars, or Lieutenant Gulliver Jones, His Vacation, I think is its original title, which is kind of hilarious too. All right, more videos later.